Hello, friends. Welcome back to Consider Yourself Lucky. I thought today, for the first episode, official first episode, I would talk a little bit about how I got this awful title of widow and how everything kind of happened and how my husband died, basically. So I'm going to see if I can get through this without crying. Sometimes I cry the entire time I'm telling the story. Sometimes I don't. So if you are on YouTube, you will see me cry. If you're listening, you will hear me cry. But sometimes I get through it okay. So either way is fine. We react differently every day to the situation. So yeah, let's just get right into it. So my husband died at the age of 42. I was 38 at the time. I'm now 39. So again, if you would have told me that this was going to happen, I would have thought you were absolutely crazy. Never in a million years did I expect to be here or to have something like this happen to myself and my kids and our families. It's been a really crappy experience and something I really wouldn't wish on anybody. So fast forward to January. I would say maybe things kind of started to happen on January 5th. My husband ended up dying on January 9th. But prior to that, he had been just sick, with like a cold, things that kind of run rampant, especially around the holidays. I always find people get sick and just weird illnesses and things like that. So on the 5th, which was the Friday, he ended up coming home early from work. He was not feeling good. His ear was causing him some pain. He thought he had an ear infection. So like most, I won't even say like most men, like anybody really, you tend to wait it out. You kind of think, okay, if I'm still not feeling good by so-and-so date, I will, go to the emergency room or whatever. And more often than not, we get sicknesses, we get colds, we get flus, we get all these things that happen to us and they go away. So anyways, the Friday the 5th, he was not feeling good. He came home early from work. He said, my ear's really bugging me. Can you go to the store and grab me some ear drops? So we kind of thought at this point, maybe he had an ear infection. Later, after he died, I came to kind of find out that he had been complaining about it a little bit more than what I had originally known. But again, nothing that you would think, oh, I need to go to the emergency room. Just like, whether you are sick with a cold and your ears kind of plugged or whatever, just general things like that. So the weekend kind of progressed and he was really going back and forth. Like one day he was like, okay, I feel good. And the next day he started to get sick to his stomach on the Saturday and he couldn't really eat. So now, of course, I'm thinking to myself, okay, on top of it all, he's got the sore ear and cold, and now he's got a stomach bug on top of it, right? And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, what else can this guy get, basically? And then, of course, as the mom, you are wanting to protect your kids. So we were kind of keeping our distance and sleeping in separate rooms because our youngest had slept with both my husband and I. He liked to sleep in bed with us. And I was sleeping downstairs with him. Anyways, you're just trying to keep everybody healthy, basically. And then kind of Sunday came around and he said he was feeling okay. He was like, I haven't thrown up, and he was able to eat a little bit. And again, just not thinking anything of it. I guess it would have been Sunday night where he started to get sick again. And he was like, okay, if I'm not feeling good in the morning, this being Monday morning, I'm going to go to Emerge before I go to work. I said, perfect. I said, we'll get the kids on the bus for school and then we'll go to Emerge if you're still not feeling good. I woke up in the morning and of course I was downstairs with my little guy in the room where the two brothers share. And then I came upstairs, I started to get my coffee ready, and he had come out as I was getting my coffee ready, and he had seemed okay initially, like nothing kind of seemed off. And he was making his cup of coffee, doing what he usually does. And then he went to sit down on the couch and right away he was like, oh, my neck. Like he was really, really in a lot of pain when he had sat down. He went back to bed and I went in to see him to see how he was doing. And he just, his eye was a little bulgy. And I thought, oh my gosh, like what on earth? And right away I started to panic, but he still seemed okay. And he's like, what's wrong? And he hadn't even noticed it himself. And I said, I said, I don't know. I said, but something's up. I said, I'm going to call my brother-in-law because I was getting the kids ready for school. And I said, I'm going to get him to take you into the emergency room right now. I said, we're not going to wait. So I called my brother-in-law. I was kind of in a little bit of a panic, or I called my sister, and he had come over within a couple minutes because they live really close to us. And I was like I said, honey, where's your wallet? Like, where's your health card? You're going to need all of these things. And he was like, they're in my work truck. So he's going down the stairs. But between this like 5-minute time span, things just started to get wonky. Like, he seemed to almost lose his balance. He was just kind of starting to get a bit confused. It almost felt like he was still able to understand who I was and all of these things, but he just something seemed to switch within a matter of a couple of minutes. So anyways, my brother-in-law came. I had said goodbye to him. I said, like, at this point, thinking he's going to go to the hospital, he's going to get a prescription and be home by dinner, like that's just the kind of thought process I had in my mind. There was just nothing that told me that things were going to take the turn that they obviously did. So anyways, it's the morning. I'm getting all 3 kids ready for school. At this time it's like 8:00 or so, and the emergency room department, the doctor calls, and he's trying to get info from me from like the last time I would have seen Dana okay. And I said, well, the night before, I said I went to bed at 11:00. He went to bed at 11:00. As far as I knew, like, everything was okay. I hadn't gotten up in the middle of the night. He hadn't come down to get me, anything. Again, all of this, like, to say, it just sucks that at this point in time, I was sleeping with my son because he wasn't sleeping upstairs with us. I wasn't in the same room with him. It's like, would I have noticed different things if I would have been sleeping with him? And then again, it's like, you're doing things because you don't want your kids to get sick. And anyways, it's just a whole thing that screws with your mind after it happens, because you just second guess everything and think, okay, if I wasn't here, would I have noticed that? Or if Cohen was not sleeping in the same room with us, there's just all these things that go on in your head, and it literally drives me crazy. But anyways, I'd said to the doctor, I said, when I went to bed, he seemed fine. He was going to sleep. And then I said, in the morning when he woke up, everything just kind of changed within the flick of a switch, And the doctor had said, okay, he's like, he had asked me what my plan was for the morning. I said, well, my son has a doctor's appointment, and this was a doctor's appointment we were waiting on for a very long time. And I said, I'm going to take him to the doctor's, and then I can come in to the emergency room after that. And the doctor said, you need to get in here right away. He's like, your husband's very sick. And I was like, okay, still like, okay. So anyways, I got the kids ready for school. We were waiting out at the bus, and, the kids were worried, and one of my kids asked me, he said, is Daddy going to die? Is Daddy going to be okay? And I said, of course he's going to be okay. He's at the hospital, and the doctors are going to help him out. Again, completely oblivious. So once the kids got on the bus, I got into my car right away. I called my in-laws and kind of told them what I knew, that he wasn't feeling very good and that he had gone to the emergency room. And so I get there and I meet my brother-in-law, and, I don't really know anything that's going on at this point. So I meet my brother-in-law, and probably about 20 minutes later, the doctor comes to get me, and he's like, we had to intubate your husband. He was, at that point when he got to the hospital, he was just like beside himself. He was pulling out IVs, and he was, he did not understand where he was, what day it was, anything. So they had to intubate him because they knew at this point that they needed to get antibiotics into him like right away. So they did that, and they're trying to figure out, because they can't do a CT scan there or an MRI at the hospital we went to. They're just small towns, so they don't have anything like that. We were waiting to get an ambulance to come and take us to a hospital that more specializes in that. So we were there for about an hour, and then we go to the first hospital, and they're doing CT scans, and they can't see, they know that his brain has fluid at this point, but they can't see any reason why it should be. Like there's nothing blocking it as to why it should be happening that way. And again, not really knowing anything. And then we ended up going to another hospital that more so specializes in neurology and brain and things like that. And when we got there, I don't even know what time it was. It was in like the early evening, maybe. And then at this point, they're trying to put like a shunt in his brain to see if they can relieve the fluid that's building up, so they can also take samples and kind of figure out what was going on. By the time we got to the third hospital, at this point, they had kind of figured out it was group A strep, or group A, whatever it's called. It's a bacteria. And at that point, they had seen a lot of early 40-something men coming in and dying from this group A. So that was just kind of their initial thought as to what it was. In the evening, because they were still trying to get fluid out and it was just building up so much again, they're like, we're going to have to go in and do brain surgery and see if we can relieve some of the pressure and see what's going on more inside. So of course, I'm there with my sister and my parents are here with the kids. I'm there with my in-laws. At this point, this is later in the evening and it's kind of like, shit, like this is really freaking bad. Like I knew it was bad, but when they said they had to do brain surgery, I thought this is really, really bad. So they did brain surgery. They came out a couple hours later and basically said, they're like, your husband's not going to wake up after this. So at this point, it's like shock and crying. And do I get my mom to bring the kids to say goodbye to him? Like there's just all of these things and thoughts and emotions and just like, what the hell is happening? Like to see him physically get up and walk around the house that morning and make a coffee, to being told around midnight, like, or 2:00 in the morning, whatever it was, that he was not going to wake up, was just like, even now talking about it, it doesn't seem like something that even happened. Like it's the weirdest thing. So anyways, we ended up deciding that we didn't want the kids to be there, because they had to do some brain surgery. One side of his face was a little bit swollen, and we kind of came to the conclusion, all of us together, that we did not want the kids to see him like that. And while I thought that my oldest daughter could handle it, I also didn't want her being the only one to see him. And then as she gets older, the other siblings feel left out, that they didn't get to see it. And anyways, there was just like all these thoughts that kind of go through your head. Even though you're going through all this, you're still somewhat thinking like, or I was anyways, and my dad was kind of thinking, talking me through this stuff too, of whether the kids should be there or not. So anyways, we're in this ICU room and they're kind of explaining things that are going to happen and things we can expect when a person dies. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like, we're all just sitting around crying and just like, again, what the heck is going on? And, he took like 4 breaths and that was it. It was a very peaceful thing to watch. He did not struggle. He did not anything, which also goes to show just how sick he got in a matter of less than 24 hours. The ultimate cause of death ended up being bacterial meningitis. So the doctors believe that with the ear infection, his eardrum may have burst and he had a perforated eardrum. And they couldn't conclusively say that, but they figured that's probably what happened. And then at this point, he was kind of sick throughout the last couple of weeks, and it may have been this group B strep, Streptococcus pneumoniae, I believe is what they call it. And they figure that would have gone into his eardrum and then went into his brain. And basically what the doctors say is they refer to it as galloping, which is what ends up happening with a lot of these bacterial infections, where you hear of sepsis and all of these other things that happen and they just go so quick. It gets to a point where it is so quick that they have no way of stopping it. And that's basically what happened to my husband. Because he was a healthy 42-year-old man, there was no way of knowing that it was anything out of the ordinary until it was too late. And that's, like I said, how they refer to it as galloping. They were trying to get everything at it as quickly as possible, every antibiotic, anything at all. And they just could not get ahead of it. And yeah, that's what ended up happening. And, I'm driving home at 5 or 6 in the morning with my parents. Just like, I remember like the first thing I said out loud, I was like, I am a widow. Like, what has just happened here? I am a widow. I couldn't. Anyways, it was just the strangest feeling ever, just driving home after that, after what had happened. And then having to tell my kids. And luckily that day actually ended up being a snow day, and the kids could just stay home, and they ended up being off school for a couple of weeks, obviously. But yeah, having to tell like my neighbors and family, again, like trying to think on the top of my head who I need to get in touch with before things start going online or people finding out. And a couple people I didn't have phone numbers, and finding them on Facebook to get a hold of them. And I just, yeah, it felt like just a chaotic mess of trying to make sure that the key people knew, who in my head had to know at that time, or in my in-laws' head, or whoever. So yeah, that is my story. Needless to say, I try not to let everything that I feel when I feel sick, or when my kids feel sick, to immediately go to that place. It's very, very hard. But I felt like it was an important story to share, because I have had probably at least a handful of people reach out to me after this has happened, and had said that if it wasn't for hearing my story, themselves could have ended up in the same situation, or their mom or their dad, like people that really had no idea that this was a thing, that doctors had said, thank goodness you brought them in and mentioned this before, because it could have turned into something really, really awful. So anyways, I know it's a hard story to hear. It's hard for me to tell, but it's also really important, because yeah, like to say my husband died from meningitis and group B strep is the craziest thing to hear out loud, but that's what happened. And maybe more people will be aware that this is something that can happen. And these are things that are actually growing in emergency rooms and things like that. You hear more about these infections and stuff like that. So definitely be careful, be proactive. It is a very rare thing what happened to my husband. Like, it's very rare what happened. It was almost like the perfect storm of events to have him be sick with that particular sickness while his eardrum perforated. Like, it's just, anyways, it's crazy. It's crazy to think of how it all happened, but it did. And I'm really trying to deal with the guilt of it all. And I know there's nothing I could have done. I know I did everything I could have done. I know I was there to help when I could help and make sure he was okay. But again, like a month prior to that, I was sick in bed for 4 days. I had gotten a stomach bug. I was throwing up. I was like lethargic and just feeling like crap for 4 days. Same how my husband was feeling. And not during any of that time would I have thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, right? You just think you're going to get better and get through it. But yeah, that's my story. I appreciate you listening if you've gotten this far. And I look forward to sharing more stories, whether it's my stories, other widow stories, because they're all very, very important. So thanks for being here.